A few months ago, I posted an Instagram poll on which fabrics I should sew with next, and I had an overwhelming response for these ones here. So here's the dress I'm going to be making. It was inspired by a modern Cinderella and was my entry for the Foundations Revealed contest this year. For the pattern, I used the Free Dolores pattern from Aranea Black, which I modified to be a pointed neckline by adding 10.5 centimeters to the center front seam and 1 centimeter on each side of pattern piece 1 and 2. Then I connected the lines and taped it together to make a paper mock-up. Everything was looking good, I thought, so I just added a curve to make the seams line up better. For the first mock-up, I used a really heavyweight canvas that I had to hand steam, and I bought a new iron right after this, but then it was time to trace the pattern and put it all together. So if you saw my tan dress video, you might know that I've been using these water-soluble markers for far too long when I could have been using these heat-soluble ones that I found on Amazon. They're really quick to use and you just can like iron them off and they don't leave any marks. Obviously chalk is an option too, but I have a habit of abandoning my projects for a few months and the marks are missing, and then also sometimes a marker leaks on them and makes it unusable. After I traced all the pieces and added the seam allowance, I cut it out in slow motion. I was appalled when I found this video. No wonder why it takes me so long to make everything. Why am I going so slow? And I sewed it all together to make this. So for reasons unknown to me, I was under the impression that this would fit perfectly, but it is so big on me. Yeah, I was reading the website and it said that the final measurements were what was given, not the your body measurements, so I had to make this a lot smaller. I ended up cutting the pattern 2 sizes smaller and got rid of some of the bust curve because I didn't need it. This time I also made the point a few centimeters higher. I think it was 12 centimeters altogether, but I just played around with the numbers until I thought it looked good. And time to sew it again. Okay, so this is looking so much better. I'm glad it actually fits this time, but there's definitely some things that need to be fixed. I want to draw a point on it, and then for this part it's still sticking out a lot. But I think if I just pinch it right here and take away maybe a centimeter on each side, it will fit more to my body. And then for the wrinkles, I think those will be fixed if I make the boning channels better. My sewing in this is absolutely horrible. But if I make the boning longer, it will pull it better, and I think the wrinkles should be taken away. So I'm kind of maybe just going to do one test piece and then start on the final. So I just drew the point while the corset was on, and I moved the bust seam adjustment and then transferred all of the changes to my paper pattern. So this is what the final pattern looked like, and I was able to start transferring that to my final satin fabric. Remember this corset? Well, I ended up cutting it up to use the coutil from it for my strength layer because I ran out. After basting the coutil and these satin layers together, I picked out this thread. I have 3 more laying around of these, and I looked for 3 days and I can't find them, and it's driving me insane. I have everything basted and pinned. I know that maybe in this video it looks like only a few minutes have passed, but it's been a few days, so this is taking quite a bit of time. Anywho, so I started sewing the pieces together, and for these seams that were very curved, I pinned them on my tailor's ham because it would help them to lay better when I sewed them together. After the pieces were sewn together, I trimmed them with my pinking shears to help finish the seams. So I didn't get any footage of this, but I also sewed a few millimeters away from each seam on both sides before moving on to the boning channels, just because I thought it gave it a really nice finished look. While I was working on the back lacing strips last night, I realized the channels were not big enough for the bones, so I tried to make them bigger, and then you can see the pen marks still that I thought I had gotten rid of. But I went to go make a new one, and I put interfacing on it to strengthen the lacing layer, and I ended up putting the glue part on the right side of the fabric, so I had to make another one. And then for that one, I just kind of cut a chunk out of the satin without thinking. Basically, I didn't have enough fabric to line the skirt, but I ended up using enough layers of the tulle that the dress wasn't see-through. Whoops. After sewing on the lacing strips, I tried to get rid of any bulk around the waist seams, and then I added coutil strips for the boning channels because twill tape was just not working out for me. Oh hey, so it's the 27th, which means I have like 3 days to finish this, and it's almost 7 o'clock. My plan for today was to finish the corset, but I got distracted with my hair and makeup. Here it is so far, and I just want to add like the sparkly things on the sides, so let's go. For the visible boning channels, I just cut out 3-inch strips of fabric, basted them together, and then carefully sewed them on, but not carefully enough. So not only did I put the channel on the wrong side twice, but the one I did do was supposed to be like the sparkly side, and it's not. So finally I was able to sew them on the right seams, and I used the hand crank because I wanted these to be as neat as possible. Then I moved on to making the bias binding, so I cut 1.5-inch strips and ironed them with the 18mm bias tape maker. And now that I just ironed that for like 20 minutes, I'm gonna sew this fabric on here, making sure this time that the sparkly side is on the right side so I don't do what I did yesterday. So I pinned all the bias binding on and then sewed from the middle of the neckline to make the point, and then I just turned everything over and top stitched. So this is what the top bias binding looked like after it was sewn, and then before I did the bottom I had to add boning. I measured and cut the boning while it was in the corset so that I knew it would fit perfectly, and then I just filed down these sharp edges with my Dremel tool, making sure to wear a mask so that I didn't breathe in any plastic dust. So this is almost finished. I just have to add the lacing holes and the grommets. I got these really cool like hexagon grommets that I think will look nice, and I like pulled it around my body and hopefully it fits me okay because it's looking a little bit small, but I followed the directions. I don't know. So I finished one side and now I can move on to the next. I was supposed to get like a special clamper thing, grommet setter for these hexagon ones, but I just used the one that I have from Amazon, and I don't know if they're like supposed to be, I don't know if you could see, they're kind of round with a hexagon around it, but looks good enough to me. So I then just marked all of my eyelet holes, and I did hole punch them and trim the excess fabric that was left, and then I used an awl and put the grommets in. So if you watched my last video, you're probably like, you said not to use the hole punch for the holes, which I know I did say that, but this fabric that I chose for this, it sucks. It's getting snagged on like my chipped nail polish, and even I used one of those like sticky like lint remover things. It got snagged on that too. So I'm just like scared to do anything. Once all the grommets were in, I laced the back of the corset, which took over an hour. Who would have thought? Today I'm going to be working on the tulle skirt. First I'm going to mark off like where the corset's going to end, and then just pin that here, and then I'm going to cut some gathers to put on the skirt. I want it to be like as poofy as possible. The base of the tutu is just a tulle circle skirt, and I cut out pieces of tulle 6, 12, and 18 inches long, and I used the gathering foot to make them into ruffles. That took forever. Next, I pinned on the ruffles with the shortest layers on the bottom and the longest layers on the top. For the shorter layers, I did also use a stiffer tool because it gave the tutu more structure. So this is like my practice waistband, and I made a circle skirt of my waist measurement with this on. For this I used a half circle skirt pattern, and I left a few extra inches on each side of the waistband so that I could add a hook and eye closure later and overlap the pieces. I cut out 2 pieces of the waistband, making the final length 7 inches, and then I sewed those 2 pieces together right sides together and clipped all of the curves. I ironed all the clip seams to one side, and on that same side I pinned and sewed a really stiff waistband fabric. When I was done with that, one side had all the sewing and all the bulk, and then the other was really smooth. I then very loosely put on the corset and traced that bottom point onto the waistband so that I knew where to sew my final organza layers. Using what I had left for each of the organza fabrics, I just cut out big long rectangles, and then I sewed them together with the sparkly organza layer as the top layer. I ended up with one really long rectangle that I gathered down and pinned and sewed to the waistband following the point that I had drawn before. For my last steps for this skirt, I hand sewed the tutu to the waistband. There was probably an easier way to do this. Then I folded over and sewed the raw edges of the waistband to finish it, and I added the hook and eye closures as the last step. So for the sleeve, I'm also using a free pattern. This one's from Mood. Right now it's a short sleeve, and I'm gonna measure my arm and add some length to it just to make the long sleeve that I wanted. And I thought it would be nice to use like a free pattern just in case anyone wants to try and recreate this themselves. I just added length to the sleeve using my arm measurement plus a few inches, and then I split the sleeve into 3 pieces on my first try for where I would be adding some elastic. So here's my sleeve mock-up, again too big for me. And I'm just gonna probably make this also 2 sizes smaller. So I fixed the size, and then for the final sleeve I ended up splitting it into 4 sections where I put the elastic. I sewed each sleeve with a French seam, and then I just marked each section with pins, and I used my arm measurement for the elastic measurements and just pulled it as tight as possible when I was sewing it. For the top of the sleeves I did a rolled hem and I threaded some elastic through. Here is my finished sleeve, but I kind of feel like it's missing something. Like this. I just wrapped ribbon around where I had sewn the elastic, and then on 2 of the pieces I hand sewed a bow. We're at the park about to take pictures, and it's 34 degrees out. And here's the final reveal. That's a wrap on me being freezing Cinderella. I'm so cold. Thank you for watching. Subscribe.